about the latest news, updates, and looking past the season for some intriguing topics. Stay tuned.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I've got my guy, So Real Suneil. Y'all know him, So Real Sports Talk over there. Suneil, how you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic, my man. I got 2 shows with Rohan in 1 week. Life is good,
Hey,
man.
life is good. Exactly. Same over here. But we're excited. We're going to be talking some 49ers and Raiders. Obviously, the 49ers face the Raiders this weekend. New Year's Day, we get some football, which is going to be nice to see. I know a lot of 49er fans are traveling. I think it's 60% of the stadium, which Raider fans are pretty loyal. 60% of the stadium is going to be filled by 49er fans. So good to see a lot of people traveling on New Year's Day for the game. So let's get into it. First piece of news, the big news really that came out yesterday. Quarterback Derek Carr is being benched. What's kind of your takeaway of that? Does that change anything in your mindset for this game? And give me your thoughts for it.
I mean, it obviously changes things, right? Now, whether or not that's going to be a positive thing, a negative thing, that's really, up to how the team, bounces back. Obviously, you would think that going from the level of Derek Carr to a guy like Jarrett Stidham, who doesn't have that much necessary experience as a starter, you would think that bodes well for the 49ers because, Derek Carr obviously has been a starter in this league for quite some time, but, this season specifically hasn't necessarily had, the greatest of seasons. He's I think leading the league in interceptions, and the offense definitely struggled this last week for the Raiders. So personally, I do think that it's going to make it easier for the 49ers, but overall, Rohan, I mean, it's a little bit of a tricky game because even though the I think the Raiders are officially out and they're not able to make the playoffs, they're still a team that's won, 4 out of the last 6 games that they've played. They're a team that can score a lot of points, and they're a team that has a really good rushing attack with, Josh Jacobs over there being the leading rusher in the league. So I think it should be, with all the turmoil that's going on there, it does look like the Raiders are looking past this season and more into next season with this move. Obviously, there's going to be some emotions there, especially with Davante Adams, who we know is very close to Derek Carr. Actually, Derek Carr is the reason why Davante Adams is there. But still, the 49ers need to be aware and need to still go out there and execute. But this could definitely be a easy dub for the 49ers if they take care of business.
No, I think so too. That's why when we get to my score prediction, you'll see why it's as wide of a margin as it is, especially for me, who I'm not normally one to give such bold predictions. But overall, yeah, I mean, this team that we're facing, this Raiders team, looks like they're looking towards the future. When you talk specifically about the Derek Carr benching, why did the Raiders do it? Well, Derek Carr has a $40 million injury guarantee for 2023, where if he gets injured over the next 2 weeks and does not pass his physical heading into the new league year, he will be granted that $40 million. Now, Carr signed a 3-year extension last year, but it's essentially similar to the deal that Patrick Mahomes signed in that it's a 1-by-1-by-1. The Raiders have flexibility to get out of the deal each of the each of the off seasons that the deal transpires, and so that's why they can move on from Derek Carr with only $5 million, I believe, in dead cap, despite his salary cap hit being so high. And so that's a whole debacle. The Raiders are obviously looking towards their future, trying to protect their investments and their salary for 2023. And moving on from Derek Carr seems like the likely situation there. That leaves the Las Vegas Raiders with Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback, a guy who has seen minimal experience in the NFL, drafted by the Patriots, I believe, in the fourth round a couple of years back out of Auburn. Touted as a guy with a strong arm. That was his main kind of go to. He had that strong arm. However, it hasn't translated to the NFL. The accuracy hasn't been there. The precision hasn't been there, and the mental makeup in a way hasn't been there. And so it's going to be a new quarterback that the 49ers are facing. But like you point out, it's a strong running game. Josh Jacobs is a Pro Bowler this year, and that's something to watch for. Although when we talk about the 49ers defense and that rush defense, they've been able to shut down opponents.
Yeah. Who do you bold prediction? Who do you think is the starting quarterback for the Raiders 2023?
2023, that's going to be interesting. I mean, there are a lot of options. I think it'd be extremely hilarious, but I think it's honestly reasonable. Let's go with our boy Jimmy G. Jimmy G,
Mm,
the Raiders in 2023. I think the Jets could be an option, obviously, for Jimmy G, but the Raiders, McDaniels is obviously there. That fit is there. He's got the fit with Salah, obviously, and even Mike McDaniel in Miami. But Jimmy G to the Raiders in 2023, I could see it.
I got a similar angle, but different quarterback. And that quarterback is actually the GOAT, Tom Brady. I think Tom
Okay,
Brady
I think that could
resurgence.
work.
Yeah, especially him linking back up with, his favorite offensive coordinator. He wanted to go to the Raiders, even in the offseason that he ended up going to Tampa Bay. But, there was that whole debacle with the coach there deciding to stick with Carr. And I also think that with the relationship now with Devontae Adams, I think that they would need to bring in somebody that instantly garners respect. So I think that Tom Brady can solve all those problems, right? You know, get guys that like attract guys back to the Raiders, because right now it is looking like a little bit of a unstable situation there. So you bring in some stability with Tom Brady, get Devontae Adams back excited to have all time great throwing him the ball like he had in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and maybe have a 1 or 2 year run with the Raiders there. So I think it's going to be Tom Brady.
That would be interesting for sure. Now, before we move on from this kind of talking about the Raiders and stuff, I did see some interesting comments not only for Brock Purdy but also D'Amico Ryans and Kyle Shanahan today on the Raiders and why they might be a dangerous team. Earlier today, Purdy talked about Max Crosby. He said how Max Crosby is really good on the edge. Whenever an opponent has a player like that you have to focus on who can do a lot of different things, you can sometimes slip up and not be ready for in terms of what they do with their secondary and whatnot. But I think they're talented across the board. Kyle Shanahan kind of followed that up by saying Max Crosby is playing probably as the second best defensive player in the league this year. I think he's been unbelievable. And D'Amico Ryans said, with the Raiders, I do see a very dangerous team because they have playmakers all over the field. You talk about their big three, obviously referring to Adams, Waller, and Renfro. They have guys who can really take over games, and we'll still have our hands full no matter who is at quarterback. We'll still have our hands full with this team. And Ryan's referenced how they've been in a lot of close games and are still vying for a playoff spot despite being in the situation that they are, which is as crazy as it sounds. Do you think this is just all talk? What do you take away from the coaches and the players talking about this Raiders defense or really Raiders team in this way?
I mean, I don't think that it's all talk. I think that it's true, right? If you go up and down the roster for the Raiders, they have a lot of talent there, right? Waller has come back and played relatively okay. Like he's played decent the last few games he's been back. Obviously, Jacobs is a all pro. Devontae Adams can go off at any time. Hunter Renfro is obviously one of the better slot receivers in the league. And then you go on the other side with Max Crosby, who is a formidable defender, right? And so there is talent all up and down. I don't think the 49ers can just come out and be like, yo, this is an easy dub for us. You know what I mean? That's for us fans to be able to be like, yeah, this game is an easy dub. But in the locker room, they definitely have to respect it's an NFL team. Any team could win at any time. You know, there was a point in the year where Carolina was an easy dub for everybody. Now they could possibly make the playoffs, right? And the Jaguars, middle of the season, everybody was like, "Oh, this is an easy dub." And look at them; they're have the foothold on a playoff spot there. So I mean, these are NFL teams; these are professionals making millions of dollars playing this game that we all enjoy watching. So I think that it's good that the 49ers see that, hey, there's a path for the Raiders to get a victory here. And they need to be aware of that, shut that down so that, their overwhelming talent on the 49ers side of the ball ends up, finishing this game early so you could get out of here healthy and with a much needed victory.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the talent of this team, that's why a lot of people projected potentially this team to make the playoffs in 2023 or come close. And Ryan's isn't wrong. This team has been in a lot of one-score games, both against good opponents and against some pretty bad opponents, which has kind of shown the fluctuation of this team. Not necessarily strong play. They've faced injury. They faced, it's been an up and down season for a lot of for their team, especially in regards to coaching. And so I don't disagree necessarily. I just don't think that their key players have been playing up to par necessarily. I think Waller been injured for a good portion of the year. Renfro has been a bit of a down year. Chandler Jones for the first half of the year was irrelevant. Max Crosby has done his job, but it's been a bit of a down year for some of their players and really a step back compared to what you expected going into the year. But still, they still possess good players and could possess a challenge for the 49ers on, what is it, Sunday? Yeah, Sunday this week.
Yeah, I mean, and like with all of the controversy, I guess, that's going around, a lot of these players are on 1-year deals, so they're still trying to get their money, whether it be with this team or another team. So there's definitely going to be guys that are out there motivated to play well. So yeah, the 49ers definitely have the opportunity. They should win this game, but we've said that a lot, at least as of late, they've been able to win all the games they're supposed to win. But we have seen earlier in the season where games that they should have won, they didn't. So always be aware. We don't want the momentum to stop and continue that momentum going in the direction that it's been going for the 49ers this past 2 months.
Yeah, no. And real quick before we continue on, I do see this comment from Cowboy Angel or Angel, however you pronounce your name. Number one power ranking. NFL ranked the 49ers in their power rankings at the number one spot, giving it over teams like the Philadelphia Eagles and all the hot teams in the NFL. Any agreement? What's your kind of thought on that?
Yeah, so one thing to put this in perspective, this is like a weekly power ranking. So at the end of last week, just for that week, the 49ers were number one power ranking. And it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Eagles have been pretty secure there, but Jalen Hurts didn't play this last week. They lost, a close game to the Cowboys. So that's why they dropped. I think some of the other teams that are usually up in the top, Kansas City, Cincinnati, they struggled a little bit this week. And the 49ers went out there and just, dominated that second half and really separated that game as far as the scoreboard at the end of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the 49ers definitely last week looked like the most dominant team. And, for the last 2 months, they've been undefeated. I think they have the longest winning streak in the league right now. And, I'm not surprised that they're number one for this week. Hopefully it stays the same next week.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how it can change unless the 49ers lose going towards the end of the year. There are a lot of hot teams. The time to be hot is the time going into the playoffs. That is the best way to have momentum. 49ers are one of those teams. I mean, you point out teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe the Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers, a lot of teams. But the 49ers, 8-game winning streak, that has to be said, cannot be understated because that's really the reason why they're still hanging around for that potential one seed.
And for, there's a lot to be said about the 49ers quality of competition. You could say there's people that are like, oh, they're not playing that good of teams, but they beat Miami. Miami's currently in the playoffs. They beat the Chargers. The Chargers are a playoff team. Tampa Bay, as of now, is currently in the playoffs. And Washington right now, if the season ended, is currently in the playoffs. So that's 4 teams right there that are playoff caliber teams that they beat. And Carolina is on the brink. I think they're another team that could possibly make the playoffs. The 49ers beat them, and New Orleans is there too, and they beat them. So it's like, obviously, I do think that they're beating like the lower end, like the 7th seed, the 6th seed in these playoffs. But you play who you're there, you handle the business that's in front of you, and I think the 49ers have shown the ability to beat quality teams, dominate teams that aren't good, and that's all they could do at this point is continue to get better week after week, handle the opponent that's in front of them, and utilize that experience and momentum going into the playoffs.
Yeah, no, agreed there, agreed there. And so moving on with the 49ers, one of their biggest things this season has been defense. Number one defense, likely in several metrics in the NFL to end the year. Defensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans has done a great job filling in with guys who have, in a way, not necessarily been star level players. He's brought in guys like T.Y. McGill, brought in guys like Keem Spence, brought in a lot of players. You even had Michael Dwumfor playing in this past game. A lot of players, and yet the 49ers still have a strong running game. What can you speak to what D'Amico Ryans has done, and also what have these players done in filling in into this role?
Yeah, and I think this was one of the biggest arguments with the fan base this offseason, right? The 49ers obviously made a concerted decision and made an effort this offseason not to necessarily go after the big names and spend all of their money on 1 or 2 big names. They decided to go after depth because they've seen that the reason why the team had struggled last season and in years where they haven't been as successful was not because they weren't talented enough. It's because they weren't deep enough when their top tier talent went down. So that's what they focused on this year was instead of signing maybe a big name edge, let's just use that money and get 2 or 3 depth pieces on the defensive line, just in case something like what eventually ended up happening. A lot of the defensive linemen went down injured, and they had guys that were able to step up, like Amenahu, like Willis, come in and make some key stops and key plays when the starters were out. So for me, I think that it's been great, right? Like the level of the ability for this team to find guys that fit the system, and then the ability for these coaches to put these guys in the right situation, coach them up in a way where they could be productive for the team. And then all credit to these guys that are going out there and performing at the level that they're performing and being, part of the top defense in the league, right? It's obviously Bosa, Warner, Greenlaw. These have been like, some of the key components that have stayed there throughout, obviously. But, there's been times where Charvarius Ward went down. There's been times where, Jimmy Ward wasn't there. There's been time, obviously, Emmanuel Mosley going down for the season, and Ark Armstead, Kinlaw, all these guys not being able to play for large portions. And the 49ers still have been able to maintain the top defense in the league. That's a testament to every level of this team, the front office for bringing in the right players of depth, the coaching staff for coaching these guys up and getting the best out of them, and then the players, obviously, for going there and executing and getting the job done.
No, definitely. And I think it's a combination of everything. Players are buying into the system, and the system clearly works. Ryans has done a phenomenal job being able to plug and play players. That's why you see some players who have success in the 49er system not necessarily have that success elsewhere, but it's also being able to maximize the talent of the players in the 49er system. We've seen players like Charles Omenihu have top 10 in the NFL pass rush win rates, according to PFF. That's phenomenal for a guy who was going to be a rotational piece, a guy who makes $1 million a year, and the 49ers traded for just a sixth round pick last offseason, or I mean, at last deadline. So it's a definitely a phenomenal job by D'Amico Ryans, who will almost certainly field head coaching opportunities this upcoming offseason. He fielded one offer last year, was a finalist for the Minnesota Vikings job, ended up withdrawing from the coaching search, saying that head coaching was not what he wanted at the moment. And now, with the amount of potential availabilities this offseason, he's likely to go not maybe not get a job, but at least field offers. So, with that in mind, who are some potential defensive coordinators that you could see to replace D'Amico Ryans?
Yeah, so I think this is a very interesting topic, one that I actually did a video on earlier today. But to touch on something that you said, I think the only way D'Amico Ryans isn't a head coach next year is if he chooses not to be. I do think that based off of what we've seen from the Kyle Shanahan immediate coaching tree with Saleh and Mike in Miami Mike. Both teams are vying for playoff positions, and to be honest, probably one of the two are going to make the playoffs because end of the season they play each other, and that's going to probably be whoever wins that game makes the playoffs. So teams are seeing, okay, not only are these guys had part of top level coordinators, quote unquote, right? With the 49ers, they've gone to situations and been able to replicate that success at the teams that they've been on. So I think that bodes well for D'Amico Ryans because teams could look at the success of a Saleh, of a McDaniel, and then be able to be like, okay, well, D'Amico Ryans could be that as well. So the only reason why he doesn't get a head coaching job is because he doesn't see the right opportunity for him. So he'd rather come back and be part of a really good defense. Now, when it goes to who replaced Ryan, obviously the 49ers brought in Fangio for a reason, and most people thought it was to transition when D'Amico Ryans leaves, Fangio comes in. But there's been a lot of rumors that Vic Fangio is going to be going wherever Sean Payton goes because there's a lot of talk about Sean Payton coming back coaching this season. So maybe he's out, right? So for me, I have two names that I think are realistic, and then one name that I think is a pipe dream. And so I'll start with the pipe dream because it's all feelings over facts. There's probably a 2% chance this happens, but I think it's fun to talk about. And for me, that pipe dream is Richard Sherman. So Richard Sherman to me is obviously has zero coaching experience, but is very tied into the 49ers. He's a big advocate for them in the media. He's somebody who still has really great relationships with the defense, with a lot of the defensive players, and somebody who is cerebral enough and smart enough to do the job, or at least be a coach if he ever wanted to do that. And there's precedent, right? We just saw Indianapolis Colts bring in Jeff Saturday with zero coaching experience to be the head coach there temporarily. And, the team has been up and down with them, but he has been able to go out there and get a couple victories as the head coach for Colts. So is that likely? Probably not, but that would be like the fun name. The one that I think is probably most likely, because it does seem like the 49ers tend to elevate from within, especially with the defensive side of the ball. And to me, that's going to be the safeties coach, Daniel Bullocks. So he has been on this coaching staff the whole time that Shanahan's been here. He was first an assistant safeties coach. Now he's the head safeties coach. And we've seen that the secondary has gotten better and better throughout the tenure of Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, being able to develop a guy like Talanoa Hufanga into a Pro Bowl level player is a feather in Bullock's cap. How Gibson's is playing as well, feather in his cap. You've seen Jimmy Ward elevate under his tutelage, and overall, the secondary as a whole has been playing a lot better, and he gets a lot of credit for that. He's played in the league, much like D'Amico Ryans, and he's young, and he's, been part of this coaching staff. So that to me would be like the continuity factor. Him just sliding into that defensive coordinator position makes a lot of sense. If the 49ers were to go for an external hire, I think that for me, the name to keep an eye on is Brian Flores. Brian Flores is right now, he's the linebackers coach in Pittsburgh. He obviously was most recently a head coach with the Miami Dolphins. He comes from the Bill Belichick defensive tree. He's somebody that was linked to Kyle Shanahan in 2017 when Kyle Shanahan got the job as a potential coach that he could bring in to be the defensive coordinator back then. Obviously, Saleh was selected, but same type of mentality, linebackers coach, very aggressive in the defensive scheme, plays a lot of man-to-man football, which is something that it seems like the 49ers are transitioning to with who they have on the roster and who they've been drafting recently. And is a guy that primarily plays a 3-4, so that might be, something to look at. But he has played a 4-3, as well. He's not necessarily scheme specific, so I think that's somebody who could be brought in. I think the players on the team would respect him because of his pedigree in the league, and I think that'd be somebody that would fit right in and bring an extra wrinkle to the 49ers defense, because he's really good at creating pressure with some exotic blitz packages that I think the defense would be excited about.
I think there are a lot of names there that you said that are going to be pretty solid for this job. I mean, when you talk about guys, obviously external, Fangio's the number one guy that obviously comes to mind, because Fangio, the connection to the Shanahans, Fangio coming in and during the offseason, and all of that, right? With Vic Fangio, we've heard the number one thing with Vic Fangio, obviously, is the Sean Payton rumors. Payton creating his staff potentially, and Fangio is the guy who he's targeting as defensive coordinator. Would Fangio want to go there? What would Fangio want to do in that situation? And also the idea of 3-4 versus 4-3. We know Fangio normally runs that 3-4. The 49ers have run a 4-3 recently, so that's another thing. But to me, overall, I think there are a ton of options. If you're looking internal, I like the idea that you brought up of our safeties coach, Daniel Bullocks. The other guy that I would want to put an eye on is linebackers coach Johnny Holland. Holland took a little bit of a hiatus because he was battling cancer. He's the linebackers coach. Dre Greenlaw has been a big factor. I mean, the linebacker room in general has been a big factor. D'Amico Ryans also was part of the linebackers. He was the linebackers coach before. You have a strong pipeline there. I think that that's another idea to look at. If you're looking at outside options, again, this is more fun than realistic. Obviously, Jim Schwartz is a guy who I would think about. I believe Jim Schwartz right now, if I am not mistaken, is with Philly. I believe Jim Schwartz. Yeah, I think he's with Philly right now. No. I think he's with Tennessee, actually. I think he's with Tennessee. But Schwartz has been a long-time defensive coordinator. The interest in Fangio tells me that the 49ers could look to just get a guy who might want to use them as a stepping stone to be a head coach. Schwartz, obviously, having the experience, has been a strong defensive coordinator before and could look to see if he can get another opportunity after faring well in a couple of other places before. So that could be an idea to me. That could be out there, and one that I'll just float for fun, even though I think it's unrealistic. Wisconsin defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard recently announced that he is not going to be with the team. 100% will get NFL interest this offseason. Was a finalist for the Green Bay Packers job, declined it 2 years ago. Now he could be in the NFL market. Again, that's a 3-4 versus a 4-3, but Leonard has been a great safeties coach. He's been a guy. I don't think the 49ers go that route. I don't even think Leonard would want to go that route. He's a Wisconsin guy through and through. But overall, yeah, a couple of guys like that.
Yeah, of course you're going to bring up a Wisconsin guy.
I mean, he's a hella good coach, so gotta bring it up.
Yeah. I think Holland is a good name. Obviously, the 49ers, the last two defensive coordinators have been former linebackers coach. So clearly there's a trend there that has been working for the 49ers. Yeah, there's a lot of options. The one thing that I can say is I'm not too worried. I think Shanahan has earned all of the faith of the faithful to know that whomever he decides is going to do the job very, very well, because I think he hasn't missed on a coach, quite yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we know. I think whatever his system is, whatever he looks for as far as characteristics and scheme, seems to be the right decision. So for me, it's not a situation that I'm worried about, just because we've seen very little drop off from the guys he's selected, and that's on either side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we got to give Kyle Shanahan a little praise there, right? Kyle Shanahan, he's done a pretty darn good job of developing coaches, or at least identifying good coaches. Brian Greasy, one of the bigger hires, which we'll talk about in just a minute, he's done wonders, right?
Hmm.
With not only with Trey Lance in the offseason, but also with the two quarterback coaches, with the two other quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo saw an increase or improvement in play. Brock Purdy has been playing well. He's a guy. Then you talk about guys like D'Amico Ryans, guys like Robert Sala, guys like Mike McDaniel, which which Kyle Shanahan has been with for a while, right? There are several coaches. Then you talk about the Kyle Shanahan tree with Sean McVay and Mike LaFleur, all these different guys. He's got a good eye for developing coaches and identifying talent in terms of coaching staff. So yeah, gotta give praise there as well.
Absolutely.
But talking about one of the topics that I just brought up, ooh, where did it before we actually get there, saw this question. Take on Debo. Play him or rest him. Saw him play, conditioning knockoff rust. I say play him, but conditioning knockoff rust, but limited snap count, similar to Javon Kinlaw last week. For those of you guys that aren't updated, Debo Samuel did return to practice in a limited capacity today. First practice since the sprain of his what was it?
MCL.
PCL? MCL. Sprain of
Hmm.
his MCL. First practice since. Remember the timeline was about 3 weeks. And so it's coming around that timeline. Back to practice today. What's your thoughts on him for this game?
Yeah, for me, it's 100% rest him. Um, I don't think that you rest him. I think that you need to get him some snaps next week's game. But as far as this week's game, I want him to be as healthy as possible. The problem with Debo is he only knows how to play one speed, and he's not somebody that's going to shy away from the same situations that puts his knee and his hamstring and all these different injuries that he has at like giving him an opportunity to get injured again. He's obviously not going to be at full strength. He's probably going to, he's missed a few weeks, so conditioning might not be where it needs to be. And those are all signs of, or all factors that could lead to another injury. He's too important to this team, especially going into the playoffs. I would give him another week of just practicing, not playing in the game. Next week, he'll get a full week of practice. Play him in that last game against Arizona, where they could play him a quarter, 2 quarters, the whole game, whatever the case may be. But I would definitely rest him this game to protect that knee and basically kind of protect Debo from Debo.
Oh, there we go. I think I agree. I think Debo Samuel, I would probably rest him in this week. I don't think there's any need for him to play, for him to risk it right now. 49ers are competitive without him. 49ers also have shown that they can work offensively right now without him. Get him to full strength so that you could best get him ready for the playoffs. I don't think that he should sit for the remainder of the year if he's 100% healthy, but I do want him. I do want him to be 100% healthy. And so if he doesn't necessarily respond well in practice this week, or if there is any sort of hesitation, it's better off having Debo sit 1 week, similar how the 49ers did with Nick Bosa earlier in the year for that one game. Similar to that, let him sit 1 week and then uh, play him in week 18, be it in a limited capacity or in full capacity. I think that there isn't necessarily any harm in sitting Debo Samuel. I think there is harm if you obviously re-aggravate the injury because of how vital he is to the offense and how much he can add. So yeah, it's a tough take because you obviously want your star players to play. That's the Kyle Shanahan mantra. And Debo Samuel, if he's healthy, then probably if he's healthy, play him. But the question is, I don't know if he's going to be 100% healthy. We haven't necessarily gotten the indication yet that that's going to be the case come Sunday.
Yeah, and even if he's healthy, like I don't know, maybe it's a little PTSD because of what happened with Elijah Mitchell, right? So Elijah Mitchell came back, looked good for a game, and then goes back on IR, and it's kind of like, well, luckily we still haven't. He got injured at a point where still were able to maybe get him back for the playoffs. But if something happens to Debo, the timeline just isn't there for him to be able to maybe get back healthy, or he's going to have to play hobbled in the playoffs and stuff like that. I think his health is really important. And obviously, I don't know how much time he needs to necessarily get a feel to get back into the swing of things, because at the end of the day, Debo is Debo. Like, he's one of one when it comes to what he needs to do in this offense. And I don't think he needs much practice running through guys. I think that's just natural for him.
Yeah, no, definitely agree here. Yeah. Ooh, let's see. Ooh, oh, I completely forgot there's a Thursday night game going on. Dak be throwing picks. Well, that's a good sign for the 49ers if he throws picks in the playoffs. But moving forward on the 49ers, obviously, 49ers looking good, can end the season potentially with the 1 seed, potentially with the 2 seed. Want to ask you, what's your thoughts? 49ers likely won't be out of the race in week 18 because if they win, they're still in it. They need a win and a Vikings loss to get the 2 seed, 2 wins in a row and 2 Eagles losses in a row to get the 1 seed. Would you play your starters in week 18 if there's still a chance for the 2 seed, even though Minnesota plays Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily to get a seed. I just want the momentum to stay, right? So it's extremely important, especially when you have a young team, that you continue to execute and get those confidence builders underneath you. Because it's like, even you look at a guy like Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa's still young, right? As far as how many years he's played in the league. Talanoa Hufanga is a second-year guy. Diamador Lenore, third-year guy. Obviously Brock Purdy hasn't even played a full season. So there's a lot of guys on this team that are young that I think a week of being off might actually be a deterrent or a detriment more than something positive to keep guys healthy. So I think that, especially with Purdy being, young, in every single game, I'm sure he's learning more and more about the game and his what he's capable of, and learning more about the offense and the timing and all that kind of stuff. I think it's extremely important that he continues to play. Luckily, the last game of the year is against a team like Arizona, where they're on their third or fourth string quarterback.
Right.
So for me, that could be a game that could be done by halftime. You know what I mean? Based off of what the 49ers are capable of, and how good this team actually is compared to what Arizona has there. So I think you play everybody. I think you try to win out. And, if they win this week, like I think we all think, and they win next week, ending the year on a 10-game win streak, finishing the season off with 13 wins. I think that's, especially where they were at the beginning of the season, I think that's a phenomenal way to end the season. I think that they'll be going into the playoffs with a lot of confidence. And I think there's a way you could do both. I think there's a way that you can play all the starters, keep the momentum going, but strategically maybe rest some guys to keep, key guys healthy. I think there's a way of doing that and still being able to get 2 victories out of it, which I think are important.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's important not only for playoff seeding, but also for just the preparation to stay on your A game, like you said. I think that's important. I don't think the 49ers lose this week, which means ultimately they're going to be playing for something in week 18, be it the 2 seed or even potentially the 1 seed. If the Vikings lose, you're playing to keep the 2 seed. If the Vikings win, you're playing to get the 2 seed next week. And the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan isn't a guy necessarily known to sit players when there's something on the line to play for. So I think that 49ers will end up playing their guys, and it's good reps. It's good reps for Brock Purdy, for the offense going into the playoffs. Now, going forward, one of the guys that has kind of received a little bit of hate recently, but it seems like he's been playing, well, not recently, over the last few years, but it seems like he's been playing a little better. Mike McGlinchey. What's your thoughts on the 49ers right tackle this season?
I think the worst thing to happen to Mike McGlinchey was him being drafted in the top 10, right? I think that's the reason why there's so much. Well, there's a spotlight shined on him because he was a top 10 draft pick. And when you compare him to maybe other guys that you could have gotten at that pick, Mike McGlinchey is probably considered not the best. Like but I would say he's probably, if there's 32 right tackles, I would say he's closer to the top half of the league than the bottom half of the league as far as a right tackle. Um, you know, unfortunately, when he misses pretty big, and it's something where it's kind of like, I think the fan base right now when it comes to Mike McGlinchey is always looking for, or they're waiting for the moment for him to mess up. So when he messes up, everybody's like, "Oh, Mike McGlinchey did it again," And obviously, this last game wasn't his necessarily best game with some of the penalties that he had and some of the misses that he had altogether. I mean, I think Mike McGlinchey is just a regular starting right tackle type of guy. And I think that, like, obviously, he's going to be a free agent this offseason. I think that if he doesn't come back cheap, the 49ers will let him walk, because they have guys on the roster that they feel like they could probably develop to play just as good. And even, last year when he got injured, Tom Compton played fairly decent, so I think that, with Mike McGlinchey, you would have liked to have him be more like a stalwart, like, even like what Aaron Banks is, you know what I mean? Like, he was a second round draft pick. You look at him and you're like, yeah, he's playing like a second round draft pick. Like, that was a good pick because he looks like he's going to be the left guard for, a decade for the 49ers. Now, Mike McGlinchey obviously hasn't given that type of confidence to the fan base, which is why I think he gets, the brunt of the criticism.
I think that's a fair assessment. When you talk about Mike McGlinchey, I think he's played well this year. I think a lot of people like to criticize Mike McGlinchey, but I think he's played well this year, which is important to note. Not only as a run blocker, but I think he's improved in pass protection a little bit. Maybe his run blocking has been a little less subpar or a little more subpar, but overall, I think he's been fine. And I think people overrate the talent at right tackle in the NFL. McGlinchey isn't going, like you said, the issue with Mike McGlinchey was he was taken in the 10th, in the top 10. Mike McGlinchey was not a top 10 player in his class. He's not. He probably hasn't lived up to the expectations of a top 10 pick. But has he been a solid rotational player? Yes. Is he likely going to get some money this offseason on a multi-year deal? Probably. The 49ers, I think they'll probably look to try and get him back. Obviously, him 1 year off the injury, maybe that decreases his value on the open market. But there is a level, not necessarily a premium, but there is a level of interest towards right tackles in the NFL and offensive linemen that are under 30 that hit the free agent market. I think that that's important to note. And Mike McGlinchey is going to be one of those guys. He's going to hit the free agent market. I think he's only 28. And so he's going to enter the prime of his career as an offensive lineman at a premium position this offseason.
What are the chances you think the 49ers bring him back?
I'd probably say 50%. I think there is interest in bringing him back. It's likely all just up to, well, one, McGlinchey, because he might want a fresh start given the way that his career here has gone with the expectations and stuff. But two, also depends on the market. Going to be a lot of teams looking for offensive line help, a lot of teams. And I think McGlinchey's services are going to be I think McGlinchey's services are going to be ones that a lot of teams are going to want the services to. And so that's why I drop it to 50%. But I do think the 49ers have interest in bringing him back, even if it's for just 1 year.
Now, obviously, last year with letting Tomlinson go, right? A lot of
Right.
people were like, wow, so obviously Tomlinson has played a lot better than McGlinchey. So I think I agree with you. I would bet more that he's not here next season than is here next season. Who do you think? What do you think the 49ers do as far as shuffling guys, or is there a guy that they bring in to play right tackle? What do you think the solution is? Let's assume that Mike McGlinchey isn't here next year.
Yeah, I mean, my dark horse solution the entire year has been moving Burford, shifting him out to right tackle, and then using one of the guys that we've had on the roster. Because right now, the 49ers have a lot of guards. They've got a lot of players that probably should be guards rather than tackles. Colt McKevich, Jalen Moore, I think probably better suited in as guard. On top of Jason Poe, Nick Zakel, guys like that, they're centers or they're guards. You've got a lot of guards on this team, and I think Burford, his body size makes him potentially be a tackle in the NFL. Obviously, has to refine himself in certain areas, but that's my dark horse option. Potentially, him being the right tackle of the future. Obviously, has to gain the trust of the coaching staff of the offensive line coach Chris Forster, but that's a dark horse option. If not, would not be surprised if they go out and trade for a right tackle, or I don't think they draft right tackle, but I think they could sign a replacement level right tackle on the market, potentially a veteran on the market for a 1 year deal, maybe even a 2 year deal.
What do you think of Burford? Because they've been doing that whole rotation with Brunskill and Burford kind of at that right guard position. Um, Burford,
Yeah.
obviously, first few games of the year, you're like, oh man, this was the steal of the draft. Another fifth round guy that they got that looks like he's gonna be a player for the next 10 years, a Pro Bowler, and all this kind of stuff. And obviously, it hasn't panned out that way. Going through the season, do you think he is the solution there at right tackle? Because I think both of us in the offseason were pretty high on him as far as him being able to be that solution and all that kind of stuff. But now that you've seen him play, obviously it's his rookie year, so guys can play a lot better. But do you feel like he can step up to that? And where can Brunskill play that if they need him to play, like move into right tackle as well?
Yeah, I think that Burford could be the guy. Obviously, this year is hard to judge. One, he hasn't necessarily been given the opportunity to grow from his mistakes a lot in games. I'm saying specifically in games because he gets rotated a lot, right?
Hmm.
It's him and Brunskill, and they still continue the rotation. That's a part of it. And so, yeah, he'll make rookie mistakes. He's a rookie. That's what you expect from him. But I think the traits are there for him to at least be in the running for the position, and I don't feel confident really with a lot of the other options. Maybe McKivitz might give him McGlinchey or whoever the best run for his money. But apart from that, I don't really feel that confident with like the current group of guys at right tackle to potentially fill the void. And so that's why I think Burford could be that dark horse.
Has Brunskill ever played right tackle?
Yeah, he played right tackle in 2020.
How did he
Short
do
period of
then? I
time.
don't
It,
remember
it
what
wasn't
he.
a great sample size of 2020, but a lot of people suggested that he could potentially play right tackle this offseason when McGlinchey was out for the first couple of weeks because he was recovering from the quad injury.
Hmm. See, I think that the likelihood of Brunskill being brought back is pretty high. I think the 49ers like
Yeah,
his ability to play multiple positions, and maybe he's the solution there because I do think that for whatever reason, and I think it's rightfully so, Kyle Shanahan does trust Brunskill. So if Burford doesn't earn the position, maybe they put Brunskill in there and have some of these younger guys play guard center type positions.
yeah, no, I think I agree. I think the biggest question mark, well, McGlinchey is one, but also Brendel, because he's been he's been all right. He's been up and down, but he has showcased he's a better run blocker. Has struggled against stronger interior defenders, but he's been up and down. I don't know if he is a Pro Bowl alternate necessarily, but do you think he returns to 2023?
What's his contract? Is this his last? Is he a free agent next
It's
season?
a yeah, he signed a 1 year deal in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. I know you're pretty high on Zakil being the center there. I know they have Jason Poe, who's the guy that I think has played center. That is a possibility there. I mean, they probably. I don't think they let him walk. I think if he's cheap, and he probably will be, they'll probably bring him back. But does that necessarily mean he's going to be the starter? I think there's a competition there like there was this offseason. So I don't think Brundle has done anything to necessarily not warrant the 49ers bringing him back, especially if he's cost effective. But I don't think he's either done anything to guarantee him the starting position if he does get brought back.
Yeah, I think that's solid analysis. I wonder, he's the one who I wonder a lot what his price range will be in the offseason. The center class, I think this offseason is going to be pretty loaded, not necessarily with top end talent, but like with those I just call them replacement level talent, average talent. I think there's
Mhm.
a good amount of those type of players this offseason that could be in the running for several teams. And so I wonder what his market would be. I wonder if he just doesn't get the deal he wants because he is 30 going into his age 31 season. Could he come back another 1 year deal? We'll see.
Yeah, and another thing for the 49ers or for us to think about, and you're more of an expert on this than me, I don't think the 49ers have a ton of money to play around with. I think it's probably going to be like 30 million or so, but a lot of their roster isn't signed. So I think they only have
Mm.
like 30 something players. So they don't have a ton of draft picks either. So this is an offseason that's going to be very interesting because they have to make their money stretch and they have to fill a lot of positions as well.
Yeah, I believe they go. I mean, obviously, it depends on how they re-sign players, but uh, the number one thing is the cap is going to likely increase. We'll see how much it increases by. I've heard that it could go up to 250 million, which would be a $42 million increase. It could be at 230 million. We'll see how much it increases by in the offseason. That'll likely dictate the amount of money that teams end up getting, which could mean another splurge this offseason. We'll see. But overall, yeah, that's another thing, obviously, to maneuver, which is why one of the reasons why, way off topic now, but one of the reasons why I don't envision the 49ers being able to bring Jimmy Garoppolo back because of the cap space.
And need. I don't think they
Yeah,
need Jimmy
that's
Garoppolo
true.
back. And I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo would want to come back. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
things going there that I think we're all safe to say Jimmy Garoppolo won't be a 49er next year. But you know what? I think both of us were saying he wasn't going to be a 49er this year. So, stranger things have happened.
yeah. All right, Sunil, we got a fun thing to end today's session. A little kind of off what we were expecting. I want to go over the Pro Bowlers because
Okay.
there were some Pro Bowl snubs. I wanted to do it last time, but we couldn't get a chance to. We can go specifically on the 49ers Pro Bowls. I want you to first give me your thoughts on when I list the player who made the Pro Bowl. Give me your thoughts on them, and then we can
Hmm.
move on to the snubs.
Okay.
So obviously, we got to start with the 6 starters that made it as starters. Start with Trent Williams.
Obviously, no brainer, right? Best left tackle in the game. Easy pick. Probably going to be an all pro as well.
Yeah, I think Trent Williams, as funny as it sounds, I think Williams has a better chance for All Pro than he would have had a better chance for Pro Bowl. The reason being,
It's
Williams
fan.
played I mean that, but he also played only 12 games this year, right? He missed 3 games. I wondered if that was going to dictate him missing out on the Pro Bowl because the NFL right now is really lucky with left tackles. There have been a good amount of left tackles, good amount of tackles in general that are they're playing really high at a really high level. Guys like Andrew Thomas for New York and players like that. Tristan Wirfs, I believe, made the Pro Bowl. But there are a lot of high end talents at tackle. Good to see Trent Williams make it though.
Mhm.
Some of the easier options: Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. Those are 2 obvious ones, same as Kyle Juszczyk. Those are
Mhm.
the other 3 obvious ones. Let's go to George Kittle. Did you think he would make the Pro Bowl going into the selection?
I mean, I think George Kittle is one of the most popular tight ends in the league. So obviously, with Pro Bowl, that does play a role. I think, especially with the fan voting and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, in the NFC, you look at it, and are there that many tight ends that are really separating themselves? I don't think that there quite is. So George Kittle, obviously, the Pro Bowl picks were already out before these last 2 games, but definitely, I think these last 2 games kind of prove why he's deserving of that nod. I think it put him up to 8 touchdowns for the season these last 2 games. So yeah, I mean, I think he deserves to be there. Maybe not when the Pro Bowl selections came out, but definitely now. I would say he's the best tight end in the NFC.
I'm not gonna lie. I was surprised. Like when I didn't know who the Pro Bowlers were when they came out. I was
Uh-huh.
on a plane. I had my brother text me, "Yo, who are the 6 Pro Bowlers?" Because I got a text that it was 6. I
Hmm.
didn't know who the 6 were. I did not expect one of those 6 to be George Kittle. I thought one of them would be a player that we'll mention on the snub list. I thought, yeah, I was a little surprised. The reason being Kittle missed 2 games earlier in the year and also had displayed levels of inefficiency in his games because he just didn't get the necessary targets. I thought Dallas Goddard would make it, but am I necessarily disappointed that Kittle made it? No. Kittle has
Hmm.
been very good. I'm just surprised because I didn't think that they'd take into account some of his efforts apart from the stat sheet. Kittle's been a phenomenal run defender this year, or run blocker this year. That's been a huge portion, especially earlier in the year. That was a huge portion of his game. A good run blocker. And he has continued those run blocking efforts while being a solid pass catcher. You see it on the film on a weekly basis. So cool to see him get it. Was surprised though for sure. But next one, the final starter of the 6, Talanoa Hufanga. Did you think he'd make the Pro Bowl?
Absolutely. And he's another guy that is going to be competing for a Pro Bowl spot. I mean, all pro spot as well. I think he's been playing really, really well. Obviously, first half of the season, the guy was probably the best defensive player in the league. It looked like it with the way he was able to, the interceptions he was getting, his disruptiveness, and things of that nature. There's obviously as the season has gone on, you see that he's not necessarily the best in coverage. He's blown some, especially when they're in zone. There's been some issues there. But I think overall, absolutely Pro Bowl level player. Definitely deserves it. And I think he's going to be somebody that is probably going to be in the Pro Bowl year after year with how young he is. And the style of play that he plays as a safety is, that throwback kind of safety that people get
Yeah.
excited about. So, and then he has like the look with the hair and all that kind of stuff, and his aggressive style of play, I think bodes well for him being a fan favorite and, future superstar in this league.
Yeah. I do honestly think the fan favorite element probably helped out Talanoa Hufanga. And for being honest, with the entire body of work that we've seen, especially over the last couple of weeks, I don't know if Talanoa Hufanga is a Pro Bowler given that they only gave 3 safeties on the Pro Bowl team. If you add 4 or 5, potentially, I think if you add 4, maybe I'd put Talanoa Hufanga on that list. I do think Antoine Winfield Jr. probably has had a better season overall, especially in terms of coverage lapses. But Hufanga has been electric. I think he would have been a Pro Bowl alternate, or I would have named him a Pro Bowl alternate. Probably put Winfield in there, and kept I think Buda Baker was the other one that was in there. Probably had Baker and Winfield Jr. be the 2 safeties.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that at the end of the day, also where what defense he's playing for, right? So when you look
Correct.
at the 49ers being the number one defense in the league, that's like most of the all the Pro Bowlers are on the offensive side, so you got to have somebody on that defense, or for Fred Warner, obviously, and Nick Bosa. But you would think that a majority of the NFC Pro Bowl defensive side has to come from the top defense in the league, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. But let's get to these Pro Bowl. They call them alternates. I call them snubs. Let's start with Christian McCaffrey. Did you think he'd make the Pro Bowl?
I mean, of course, like I'm hated by a lot of the faithful because I think he's the most influential player on this offense. I would right now, hands down, he would be my offensive MVP of this team. So of course he's a Pro Bowler. I mean, the amount his usage rate with this offense, his performance on this offense, the amount of uh, yards he gets from scrimmage, I think it's crazy to me that he's not on the Pro Bowl. I don't know how many running backs made it.
4.
For
It
it,
was Miles Sanders, Tony Pollard, and then this is in the NFC itself. Yeah, there were 4. There were 4.
yeah. So I mean, Tony Pollard. I mean, he's had a great season, but he's not as important to Dallas as CMC is to the 49ers. That's just the way that I look at it. And yeah, I mean, I look at it and I think that for sure it's criminal that CMC isn't there.
Yeah. I mean, I want to give credit to the guys that made it overall, but I think Christian McCaffrey is the MVP on one of the most prolific offenses in the last 8 weeks. And I know I think his time in Carolina definitely hurt his caseness in a way because
Mm-hmm.
obviously the way that Carolina played to begin the year. But McCaffrey has been like he's just been amazing. He has the most all-purpose yards of any of the Pro Bowlers that were named of the starters, showing his impact. And we've seen his impact not only statistically but on the field. You see the amount of attention he draws. You see what kind of player he is. He's played at a Pro Bowl level this year, and he's had a Pro Bowl level impact. I was very surprised he didn't make the Pro Bowl. But some of the other guys that did not make it that were selected as alternates, let's go with Mooney Ward. Did you think Mooney Ward would make it?
So this is one where I think it hurts him that the position that he plays,
Yeah.
because I think that Mooney Ward definitely could have made it, but this is one where I see like guys that did make it there. It's hard to be like Mooney Ward makes it over them. You know what I mean? Like I don't think anybody would be mad if Mooney Ward was there, but also that he's not there. Like it's hard to have him replace somebody because I think the level of play there is pretty even with the guys that made it. I think it's just a very, very like all those guys are elite. I think when it comes
Yeah.
to the cornerback position. So I would have loved to see him because obviously we get to see him week in and week out, and we know what a huge, our defense is obviously much better because he's there, and the way he's locked up opposing wide receivers and all of that, I think is amazing. So I think he deserves it, but I also understand why he possibly didn't make it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he deserves the Pro Bowl alternate role. I don't think that I'm not necessarily surprised he didn't make it. I was even surprised that the four that made it did make it. I think that James Bradbury has had arguably the second best season of the quarterbacks. Maybe Darius Slay and James Bradbury could arguably have the top two quarterback seasons,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how you see it. I thought Bradbury should have been a Pro Bowler. I think he's a bigger snub than Charvarius Ward. But Ward's a top six quarter, probably top six, top seven quarter in the NFC this season. And so I
I
would
think he's
definitely
higher
have
than
him in
that,
there.
bro. I think he's
No,
higher
based
than
on how
that.
it was, because you got the four that ended up playing. What do you call it? The four that ended up making the Pro Bowl. I think
Who
James
were the four that
Bradbury's
made
there.
it?
Jair Alexander, Tariq Woolen,
Slay.
Slay, and Trayvon Diggs.
See, Trayvon is the guy that I think
But he's played
could.
well this year.
Yeah,
I think he's played better than last year. It's tough. I mean, it obviously depends on what you value out of a
yeah.
quarterback because, like, one will get you more interceptions, stuff like that. I think Ward is probably, if I were to rank, I think Ward would be 5. I would probably put him 5. I'd probably put in what do you call it? I'd probably put in Bradbury over Alexander and then put Ward over Alexander this year specifically.
Yeah, it's tough because I think that what Ward obviously brings to the 49ers is more like being able to stop a receiver versus maybe as much get the interception, which I think is the
Yeah,
sexy thing for corners to do. And
right.
I think that his talent and the run defending, as far as his tackling ability, is something that isn't sexy, quote unquote. So I think those things are overlooked versus the guys that are just disruptors in the passing game or get mad interceptions and things like that. Where I think that's why I respect that, because the type of corner we need in this defense is perfectly Mooney Ward. You know what I mean? So he
Yeah.
does everything we need of him at a very high level.
Yeah, no, I agree. Two guys that I won't talk too much about because I didn't think it was a surprise. Robbie Gould and Money Mitch were both alternates. No problem with there. Both guys have been uh, pretty
Average.
consistent for the 49ers. They've been fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the guy I want to talk to you about, Debo Samuel, was a Pro Bowl alternate. Did you think he would make the Pro Bowl alternate list?
Yeah, I don't know if Debo has had his best season this year, to be honest. Like, he's missed a few games. Like, numbers wise, I think he's okay, but I don't think he's. I I think Ayuk's had a better year than him, to be honest. And
He
so
has.
when you look at the who at the end of the game had the most catches, the most yards, all that kind of stuff. I think there's been more games that Ayuk has been there than Debo's been there. So yeah, for me, I could understand. I mean, I think that he's an alternate because of the fan favorite type aspect to him, and he's obviously very well known in the fantasy realm. But I think that most people that have him as fantasy picked him very high, and I don't think that he's necessarily panned out the way that they wanted him to this season. So yeah, I'm a big Debo guy. I love Debo, but I think Ayuk is the bigger snub than Debo.
Debo Samuel most certainly, not most certainly, I won't say that, but I don't think he should have made the Pro Bowl as an alternate even this year. I don't think his impact has been there. His route running has not improved. His separation has not necessarily improved. It seems like he might have been a little more out of shape at the beginning of the year, which has forced him to get essentially an ADOT average depth of target of around like 4 or 5 yards per target, meaning he's catching balls at a much shorter radius and then getting the yards after the catch. Still elite after the catch. That's not never been his issue, but the route running and the separation, as well as the hands, he had a huge drop issue to begin the year. Not a surprise that he didn't make the Pro Bowl as a starter, and I was surprised that he did. He was there as an alternate. Do you think Ayuk probably deserves it over him if you were to name a 49er receiver? And do you think
Yeah,
there are other players that probably deserve it over Debo in general? I don't know if he's in that top 15 receiver realm this year.
yeah, and I mean, we look at even the 49ers offense last season. If Debo was not there, this 49ers offense had no chance to be
Right.
effective and stuff like that. Now we've seen Debo miss multiple games and the offense has been fine. Obviously, that points to the direction of CMC being a snub and not being in the actual Pro Bowler list. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think I would have taken Ayuk over Debo because Ayuk's been more consistent. Ayuk's been available, and I think that he's performed pretty much every single game. So for me, if a 49er needed to be in the Pro Bowl, to me, it would be Ayuk.
Yeah, I think no disagreement here. But I think that that's a good way, a fun segment to end today's show. For those of you guys in the chat, I want to thank you everybody for tuning in. Obviously, have a happy holidays. Enjoy the time with your families as the new year arrives. Sunil, obviously, thank you as well for being my co-host today. A fun show, and glad to talk to you again. For everybody else, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.